This talk is going to focus on one of the fundamental problems that we run into when we begin doing our research into various aspects of history and science as well. I mean, this problem permeates everything in today's day and age, and that's the problem of polarization within your field of study. Now, what is that? What's going on here? As researchers, when we start to dive into a subject, we very quickly find that there exists two camps within your field of study. All right? And these two camps represent either side of a spectrum. Let's go ahead and let's look at our topic, our research topic as a spectrum. Because that's the reality, that's what it kind of is anyways. So in the spectrum, you have one side and you have the other side. And then between those two sides, you have the shades of everything else, correct? So in history, in our science too, but in our historical topics, especially in today's day and age, we find that there are two very distinct sides to this spectrum, right? You have the one side, which is essentially the academic side, the hardcore academia side. These people, these are the people that have bought into the system 100%. They question very little, and they regurgitate everything that particular system has created for them, right? They're very good at following the textbook that they paid for, right? So they paid a lot of money for that textbook and for this education, and so you better believe that they're going to regurgitate that. All right, so that's one side of the spectrum. Let's call that side the academia side, the hardcore academia side. And for human psychology, we can have fun with this. We'll give it a color as well. Let's call this the purple side, okay? So you have the hardcore academic side who they believe they have it all figured out. Those that came before them figured it out already and they're done. There's very little else to figure out, just some details, and you will listen to whatever those people say, and that's it, right? No arguing. Heaven help you if you argue with that side. All right? Now, as researchers, we've all run into that, and that's probably one of the very first things you ran into while you began to research your topic, and that's also probably one of the reasons that you got turned off from the topic. Right? So that side of the spectrum, the purple side of the spectrum, they're very rigid. They've got it figured out, and you as a newcomer, where do you fit in, right? It's very disheartening when you see something like that. You get into academia and you're looking forward to contribute. You want to learn what's come before you, and then you want to contribute. You want to find new stuff. You want to make those discoveries, and you want to make the discoveries that change the paradigm, right? Especially in Western psychology is fascinating because everybody grows up thinking that one person can change everything, and then that's the way it is, right? So if you follow the scientific method and you do all of that, suddenly and you question the status quo, and then all of a sudden everybody, maybe there's some resistance, but at the end of the day, hey, you questioned it, you're the big strong person, and then everybody changes their mind instantly because you've provided the evidence, right? You've made the breakthrough. How often does that happen, right? It never happens. There's a lot of reasons why this doesn't happen, and we'll get into that side, okay? We'll get into the reasons why this doesn't happen. But when you run into mainstream academia, that's what you hit, right? It's a wall. It's an unmoving wall. So a lot of people are like, man, this sucks. And so you back off, right? A lot of people just stop there. Unfortunately, we lose probably a lot of talent that could have been doing all kinds of amazing work helping the research community and historical topics. Archaeology, paleontology, it doesn't matter what ology you're talking about, right? I guarantee you we've lost quite a lot of people because of the absolute disgusting rigidity of mainstream academia. All right, so that's one side of the spectrum, and that's probably something that turned you off. All right. So the purple side is rigid. That's academia. They've got it locked down. It's in the mainstream, and if you don't believe it, right, you're crazy. You're a conspiracy theorist. You're wrong. How dare you question? Right? Those are bad things. But you find your questions are legit. So if you come in with an innocent mindset and you come in with the mindset that you're just looking for the truth, right? The academia side is going to be a huge turnoff. It's going to be like a slap in the face. And in a lot of cases, it's pretty much just a 1-2 punch to the head. I mean, that takes a lot of people out of the field. We lose a lot of people because of that. But let's say you stick around, all right? You take the punch to the face, right? To the gut, to the face. You get beat down. Like, all right. But hey, wait a second. All right, mainstream academia doesn't feel right though, right? You stand your ground though, right? You've been slapped around, but you're still interested and you still want to make a difference. So since everything exists on a spectrum, now what do? All right, well, you're going to get bounced back to, basically the other side of the spectrum. So as you began to research a topic, there's probably a good chance that you had already run into some of maybe what you had considered some of the more crazier aspects of your particular field of study. All right, so this will bounce us over to the other side of the spectrum. All right, so the other side of the spectrum, this is where we start to get into, I guess, what we could call alternative academia, alternative research. I don't necessarily like the term alternative, but we'll use it for now. And once again, let's keep it simple for us humans. We'll have this side be a color. Let's make that side yellow. All right, so we have the purple side is the academic side. The yellow side, these guys are the alt-academic side, right? So you might start gravitating over towards the yellow side, alt-academia. Because initially, it may actually seem like they're more inclusive, they're more open, right? They're willing to entertain the different ideas, the different bits of evidence that exists for whatever particular research you're involved in. And that's true, right? So as you start to drift over across the spectrum towards the yellow side, you're going to soon find yourself having the exact same problem that you had on the academic side. When you start to drift over to the alt-academic side of your research, and you should, there's tons of great evidence on that side, you absolutely should do it. You have to be careful of getting entrapped in their BS as well. All right, so just as you discovered, hey, the academic side is obviously lying in a lot of regards, or just downright corrupt, etc., all of that same stuff applies to the alt-academic side as well. The alt-academic side is just as susceptible to the same psychological trappings. This is important to hear. And this is what people don't want to hear on the alt-academic side, right? People on the academic side are ready to be criticized, but they unfortunately hold a certain position of power or arrogance because the system backs them up. So even if their position is ridiculous, the overarching societal system still says they're correct, so they can walk around smugly with that on their side. And this causes problems with trying to get people interested in the alt-academic side, and it also helps to solidify the polarization of the alt-academic side. Why? What's going on here? So basic human psychology plays into all of this crap, and this is what you have to make sure that you are not being entrapped in. All right, so there's two issues we have to cover here on the polarization of the alt-academic side. The first part is that when you go over to a side, when you pick a side, you generally start to feel attachment to that side, and you're going to want to play for that team, and then you're going to want to defend that team no matter what, right? So you get that bit of tribalism going on in there. Now, I'm not saying tribalism is bad, far from it, but too much of anything is bad. So if you gravitate to one side or the other, you will start to defend that side with religious zealotry, and that's what you need to watch out for. Right, so that is one psychological entrapment that you can fall into on either side, but the people on the alt-academic side are just as guilty. This zealotry is probably what turned you off from the mainstream academic side. So please believe that it is possible for the exact same thing to happen for those on the alt-academic side. Now at this point, you might think I'm just repeating myself and you're about to turn this crap off. Okay, don't. I'm repeating myself on purpose. The point of these kinds of talks is to drill into your head certain concepts that you need to be aware of for the rest of your existence. And repetition is one of the techniques that we use to do that. I only interject to say that right now so that you all understand what's going on here. This is not just schizobabble. We'll get into all that later. There's tons of that to go talk about. Don't worry about it. We'll get there. But one of the techniques that you need to use as a researcher when you're researching is to make sure that you are building yourself up and not falling into these entrapments. Now, going back to entrapments, there's another part of this. So if we start to see somebody being polarized, if we see a group of people being polarized, we see institutions on either side of the spectrum now starting to collate and just build up walls and say, we're right, no, we're right, no, we're right over here, right? What does that do to everybody in the middle? Anywhere in the middle. It doesn't matter where you are kind of on that spectrum. What's going to happen is that those people are going to be turned off from both sides. And this is unfortunate. This is how we lose talent in our research community. So as you as a researcher start to make discoveries, start to connect the dots, start to find things that maybe nobody has found before, or found ways to look at things that nobody has looked at before, it's very important to not approach this with religious zealotry. I don't want to see it, because I want to see what you guys come up with. Like, this is what I do on my spare time, not just this crap. I want to read, I want to see the evidence, I want to know what other people are finding relative to whatever's going on in your studies, so that I can then feed off of that, right? It's important for me to be able to experience that stuff. So please, when you're doing this, make sure that you are not falling onto either side of the polarizations. Now that we've said that a million times over, let's get into the meat and bones of how we stay away from that. All right, now that we've identified some of the problems, and there's more, there's way more, but I'm just going to keep rambling on, and we'll try to keep these not 10 hours long. We'll shorten it up a little bit, all right? So dealing with polarization in science and history is challenging, like extremely hard, and it's because of the human ego. All right, that's probably one of the number one things that we have to go up against. But let's go over some of the points that we need to make sure that we are aware of when we are dealing with polarization in the spectrum. Okay, so one of the things we need to do when we start getting into any of our topics of study is we need to make sure that we foster open communication. We want to make sure that you are encouraging open and respectful dialogue among everybody with all of the perspectives that exist, even the perspectives that you might think are ridiculous. All right, it's important to have constructive discussions where ideas can be shared, challenged, examined, all of that stuff in a critical, objectively critical fashion. Right? Promoting active listening and discouraging personal attacks or dismissive behavior is also part of that. Right? Going in and talking garbage about people, just about people, or just talking down to their idea without you having anything that actually proves any of that incorrect is not how you can approach that. All right? Now, the next thing, we've kind of touched on this, but I want to make sure that we repeat this. All right? We want to promote evidence-based reasoning. Evidence-based reasoning is extraordinarily important when it comes to any kind of research. To do this, what we want to do is we want to emphasize the importance of basic scientific discussion on evidence and rigorous methodology. Right? We want to encourage researchers to support their arguments with experiments, data, peer-reviewed studies, etc. Whatever we can get in there that is hard evidence, at least as far as we can tell. All right? We do this by focusing on objective evidence so that it becomes easier to find common ground and overcome our personal biases. Our personal biases, that's a huge problem, and that once again relates to ego. We'll talk about ego some other time. All right, the next thing we need to make sure we do is we want to encourage interdisciplinary collaboration. This is key, and it's probably something all of you have probably run into in your studies. What do I mean by that? If you're into ancient history, you've probably realized that, oh, now I need to know geology. Why? Because I need to learn stratigraphy. All right, and then you start learning, oh, not only do I have to learn that, but now I have to figure out how the ancients knew about all this stuff with cosmology. So now I'm learning cosmology, etc., etc. Right? Interdisciplinary collaborations are important. You ignore those at your own peril. Right? Just as we can fall into either side on a polarization scale with respect to an idea, you can also fall into a polarization scale with respect to how you do your research. If you think that the only way to do archaeology is to only learn archaeology and nothing else, you branch out into absolutely nothing else, I promise you, you will never understand anything. It's over for you. So don't get trapped into polarizing yourself into being stuck into one field. Keep your mind open and go learn other stuff. I promise you, your field will grow exponentially once you start learning other fields of science and history that you originally maybe never thought would have helped you. Go do it. And you need to do all of this while using critical thinking skills. Now, we will go over critical thinking skills in a different talk, but I want to bring it up here to make sure that you understand that all of the things you do here, all of them, every single little aspect of your historical, scientific research, whatever, is done using critical thinking. This is important. It's important to challenge prevailing theories. You want to make sure you explore alternative explanations, right? You need to encourage critical thinking, not just in yourself, but others around you as well, right? Get those debates going. Make sure that dogmatic positions are not held. And if you find yourself holding a dogmatic position, get out of it. Look at yourself. Ask yourself questions. Am I in a dogmatic position? We will go over that as well in a different video. But for now, make sure that everything you approach, all of these aspects, is used using critical thinking capabilities. Using the critical thinking skills that we will build up over time is going to help us not only get rid of the dogmatism that we find in a spectrum in our research, but ultimately we really want to get rid of the concept of a spectrum. There's no reason to pick sides when it comes to history and science. All right, if you are an objective human and you don't have any corrupt reason to study history, if you're just looking for the truth, then there's no reason for you to be on a side. Zero reason. Do not become the people that you hate. And it doesn't really matter which side of the spectrum you fall on. I don't care if you're on the academic side. I don't care if you're on the alt-academic side. I do not care. If you have bunkered down on one of those two ends of the spectrum, you are in the wrong place. You need to pull yourself out of there. Because you're probably extremely talented. You probably have a ton of talent. And that is being wasted because you've decided to choose a side on the spectrum. Now, for those of you who will remain in the middle of the spectrum, good job. But we have a long journey as well. Like I said, we want to get rid of the spectrum, right? We don't want to say we're on the spectrum. We just want to say we're on the road to truth. Because if you are not on the road to truth, we don't need you. You are 100% garbage in the field of study you are in. We do not need trash. What do we do with trash? We discard it. Remember that when you look at spectrums. Remember that when you look at either side of the spectrum and you see people hunkering down on a particular side. Once you see somebody hunkering down on a side and be willing to die on that hill, you know that that person is not looking for the truth. They are doing something else. They have other motives for being in this field of study. And those are dangerous people. So it's important for us to not become those people. Do not fall into the trappings that will throw you on either side of the spectrum. Use your critical thinking skills to pull yourself up. Bring other people into the fold. Lead by example. Look for the truth. Because I am not interested in anything else. I want the truth. Because the reason why we are doing this research, a lot of us, is to find the ultimate truth. And we're not going to do that if we follow corrupt institutions on either side of that spectrum. Stay on the road to truth.